Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, once again, together with my best friend and yours, Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the 6th day of the month of Tammuz. 5779 is July the 1st, 2019. And this week, the Torah portion of Balak, here in the land of Israel, that is. Good to be back here on Temple Talk with Yitzchak Reuven in the historic Abernathy building downtown
Pleasure to
Jerusalem.
have you back, Rabbi. I am so tired of hearing myself. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this show.
Well, thank you for your warm welcome. It's good to be back. Had a very intense short trip to the United States of America, where I met with many people who love the Torah and who love Hashem. I was eyewitness to, I don't know what exactly, spiritual yearning and that sort of thing.
What does spiritual yearning look like? You were eyewitness to
spiritual yearning, it can't really be seen with the eyes, it's true. It is absolutely true. Although this month of Tammuz is all about seeing. And that's what's really interesting, especially when we consider the connection between this month of Tammuz and this week's Torah portion, which is also about seeing, as we'll explain. How are you, Yitzchak? How have you been?
I'm okay.
How were your 3 weeks of Temple Talk without me? Thanks for letting me back on.
Yeah, well, it was like one long monologue. But I survived, and I guess the listeners hopefully have come back. I made it clear last week that you'd be back, so hopefully everybody is returning in droves to hear you.
Well, I was temporarily stranded, but I did make it back.
We've all been temporarily stranded in
here
one place in one time or another.
So, what is Tammuz all about, this month of Tammuz? It is actually considered to be, in a way, I guess you'd say in a mystical sense, the worst of times. Because what happened was, there's a prehistory, a backstory to this month of Tammuz, which everybody knows that a week from Sunday we'll be observing the fast of the 17th day of Tammuz. It actually occurs on Shabbat, but it is postponed to Sunday, as will be Tisha B'Av this year as well. 17th of Tammuz is the day that begins the traditional 3-week period of mourning and introspection for the Holy Temple. The day that the walls of Jerusalem were breached, the beginning, as it were, of the end of the process that leads to the climax of the destruction of the Holy Temple.
Both
Holy temples. And so the month of Tammuz is colored very, very much, is tinged by this aspect of negativity, of mourning that begins on the 17th. But there is a backstory to the month of Tammuz that occurred long before the destruction of the first temple and then the second temple. And that is something that we read about very recently, Parashat Shalach. Because according to our chronology preserved by our sages, the spies that were sent out to scout out the land of Canaan, which became the land of Israel, known as the land of Israel by Moshe Rabbeinu, the spies that left the camp of Israel to spy left at the end of Sivan. They left to begin their mission. The last few days of Sivan, I believe it was the 26th day of the month of Sivan, and they returned to give their evil report the eve of the 9th of Av. So there was a couple days in the end of Sivan that was kind of tainted by their mission and the first days of the month of Av, but the entire month of Tammuz is taken up by their walking. And make a long story short, in that whole perplexing episode of the failure of the spies to connect to the potential of the land and the redemptive quality of the land, and to see everything in a positive light, and to realize that Hashem was guiding them, and to realize that Hashem was deflecting the eyes of the enemies that lived there, and that he was holding them so tightly in his hands the whole time. Instead, they had this cosmic freak out, and they became totally embroiled, enmeshed, sunk in this terrible, terrible, negative, pessimistic outlook. And they're walking around, they see everything in a very, very negative light, and they decide that this is not possible, and they somehow forget about, negate every promise that Hashem made from the time of Abraham. He's promising over and over again, so that when I'll bring you into this wonderful land, and that didn't work out for them, and instead they were totally discombobulated. And this is the background of the month of Tammuz, and therefore we are taught that the month of Tammuz is all about rectifying the sense of vision, whereas the month of Av is about the sense of hearing and rectifying hearing. The idea is that there are basically two sins, two aspects of negative behavior that are associated with this whole debacle of the spies, and that is seeing and hearing, and actually speaking as well, because what happened was they saw everything the way they saw it, which was a matter of choice, it really was, and they came back and they delivered this terrible evil report about the land, and the evil report is called Diba, not Lashon Hara. What is the difference between Lashon Hara, which is generally translated as gossip or tale-bearing, to Diba, which is like a type of slander? The difference is, everybody knows, that the Torah law is very, very scrupulous and very, very serious and complex and detailed about how to speak. We are exhorted by Torah law to only say good things and to only speak positively about other people. When someone says something about another person that's negative in any way, that's disparaging, even if it's true, it's forbidden. Just because it's true doesn't mean that it's not Lashon Hara. In fact, the definition of Lashon Hara, a lot of people know that expression. Lashon Hara literally means bad speech, evil speech. And it's generally translated as gossip. That might not be accurate, though, because Lashon Hara can be true. But when you say something about someone else designed to cause them damage or designed to deride them, something negative, even if it's true, that's forbidden. You're not supposed to say negative things about other people in a way that can hurt them. But Diba, which is what happened here, that they brought out what the Torah calls here in Parashat Shalach, Dibat haaretz, means slander against the land, means an outright lie. It's not even true. That's the difference. That's what they did. It was total fabrication. It was made up. It was fictitious. It was just their own invention, the things that they said about the land. And that, as we know, did the damage that it did forever. I say forever because it was so severe, the repercussions, the concentric circles in time that were formed by this terrible, terrible deed that we're still suffering from today. The sin of the spies, their rejection, as it were, of the land of Israel, which is precisely what we're trying to fix in our generation.
And I would surmise, Rabbi, because I have to believe that the month of Tammuz isn't intrinsically negative. God created time, and time is beautiful, and
time is nothing but a vehicle for us to connect with Hashem anyway, because Hashem is above time and space. So that, in fact, we invented time, as we've spoken about in Parashat Bo, in Exodus 12 all the time.
Time is our deal.
Time is our deal. Hashem says that we are to sanctify time. So you have a very good point. So I don't mean to say that it is totally negative.
But I have to believe then that the tikkun, the rectification for Tammuz, is the Mikdash itself.
Exactly.
Once we build the Mikdash, then Tammuz, the character of Tammuz, will change.
And I think it's already changing, and it's up to us to change. I mean, ultimately, the idea is that the temple has to be built, but the idea is we can already fix the downside of the month of Tammuz by our positive seeing, by seeing things in a good light, by seeing the good things in the land of Israel, by looking at things with an ayin tov. An ayin tov literally means a good eye, which is the opposite of the famed ayin hara, an evil eye, a bad eye, which of course is the major characteristic of none other than the anti-hero of our weekly portion here in the land of Israel, Balaam, who actually had one eye that was blocked up, shatum ha'ayin, right? He had an evil eye. I'll talk more about that in this week's Torah lesson, God willing, and share some insights into the character of this amazingly evil person named Bilaam, cohort of the Midianite king Balak. And so the tikkun, the rectification we learn for this month of Tammuz, the way to try and participate in undoing the sin of the spies, in fixing the sin of the spies, is to see the land of Israel in a good light. And of course, the partner, the counter piece of that equation is to only hear, to only say positive things as well. And as we have taught in the past, and there's actually a recorded lesson about this that I'm hoping to post soon. The secret of the month of Tammuz, the secret of the name of the month of Tammuz, which is actually associated with a pagan deity. And why would the name of a Hebrew month be associated with this pagan deity? And if you remember that whole Torah lesson, it's really, really amazing, because Tammuz is basically all about crying over nothing. And the whole idea of this obsession with sadness, with misery, with kind of like a melancholy nostalgia that people get caught up in because it weighs you down and it gives you a certain kind of you get stuck in like this almost kind of like a worship of the past, and it stops you from moving forward. It stops you from actually rebuilding. And this is the whole problem of these 3 weeks in Jewish life, the world according to us at least, is that the Jewish people are stuck in a cycle of mourning, which unfortunately the main point of the mourning and the main emphasis of why we should be mourning for the temple during this period has been somehow forgotten or sidestepped, and that is, it's supposed to be an impetus for us to rise up and rebuild the Holy Temple. It's not enough, and there's unfortunately too many people think that the goal of the mourning of the Holy Temple is to continue the mourning itself, and that somehow by mourning we are exhibiting piety. We are showing how religious we are. We are showing how much we care for Hashem's honor and for the temple. But that's not it. The mourning is supposed to make you crazy. It's supposed to make you itch. It's supposed to make you so upset that you're sick and tired of mourning, and that you want the mourning to stop.
The original sin of the spies was the fact that, as God said, you're mourning for nothing. And so if that's what we're doing today, mourning for nothing, just for the sake of mourning, then we haven't learned a thing from the sin of the spies, from that whole debacle. But I will say,
I don't want to paint with such a wide brush, because the fact is that there are many wonderful, holy
that's exactly what I'm
Jewish people that are mourning for the temple, because they do feel very deeply.
Yeah, no, for sure, if it's sincerely felt. But I will also say that, this is our 3 weeks rant, right? But I will also say that in the many years that we've been doing this 3 weeks rant, that the reality has changed dramatically, and there is much more consciousness today here in Israel about rebuilding the Holy Temple, and about changing the reality, and about getting out of the, mourning for mourning's sake, but really coming to grips with, the choice that lies before us, which is we can choose to mourn or we can choose to build.
Exactly. And then it's up to us, essentially, if we ever want it to change, if we ever want the situation to be otherwise, then we have to demonstrate that we have graduated past this idea of this cycle of mourning, which seems endless, and that it's time to make the Holy Temple a reality. That's what we're all about. That's what this whole effort is all about. And that's what really the history of the Jewish people is all about. It's about the ultimate redemption of humanity, which basically means knowledge of Hashem and total, all-encompassing connection to godliness. That's the goal of human life. That's what the secret of being a person really is, and that's what we're trying to connect with. So that is on one foot an aspect of Tammuz that we're absolutely working on, the aspect of seeing in a very, very good light. Enter Parashat Balak here in the land of Israel. I say that because, again, there's this disparity for another few weeks between the Torah reading in Israel and the Torah reading in the diaspora. Balak is such an amazing Torah portion, really, really wondrous in its whole storyline and in the things that are unfolding here. There's so much inexplicable about it. There's so much mystery about it. Basically, we've gone through the generation now, and the children of Israel are about to enter into the land. And this is no longer the generation that against whom it was decreed death in the desert because of their rejection of the land as a result of the sin of the spies. This is their children. This is their children, and they're about to go in. There they are, in the desert, surrounded by the clouds of glory, all their needs met in divine providence. So, drinking the water from the well of Miriam, eating the manna, this generation so totally connected to Hashem himself. And they're about to pass into the land of Israel pretty soon. And they just smote the kings of Moab, Sichon and Og, right?
Arad, king of
Canaan. And Ammon. And they're about to go into the land. And Balak, who is king of Moab,
he happened to be king of Moab at that time.
Right. He gets very, very nervous about all of this, and he goes and hires this famed occultist.
Found him on Craigslist.
Famed necromancer. This famed conjurer, illusionist, snake oil man. I don't know how to describe him exactly. Actually, that's extremely unfair and extremely
he was a prophet.
Right.
He spoke God's words.
He did, and he was very close to God. And it's all about potential and choice. So Balaam was no conjurer, a snake oil man. In fact, he was a great prophet. In fact, our sages tell us that all the prophets of old were Jews. In fact, many times I get emails from people telling me that they're prophets and that they're going to be, and what's going to happen. And I always ask them if they're Jewish. No offense or anything. None taken, I hope, but I always ask them. And if they tell me that they're not, then I tell them that they can't possibly be prophets or that they don't have a right mama. Because every prophet was always a Jew except for Balaam. And he was a very accomplished spiritual master. In fact, there are some parallels between him and Moshe himself, and there are some parallels between him and Avraham.
Right.
So we're going to speak about this more, God willing, in this week's video lesson about Balaam, and I want to share just a little teaser here. Now that I'm back from America, I want to share some insights, some new insights into the character of Balaam, because he's really so perplexing and so enigmatic. But he was a great philosopher. He was a great spiritual master. He was he's described by our sages as kind of being like the twinner of Moshe himself. Mm-hmm. And its potential, he could have been as high. He could have been somebody. He could have been he could have been
to be a bum.
He could have been the champion of the world,
right?
As it were, as it has been sung. So the difference, though, is this eye that he had. He had. Speaking of Tammuz, the Torah emphasizes in these verses about him speaking about himself this issue that he had with his eye and the way he looked at things. So basically, this whole Parsha is about getting a good view of the children of Israel. Go here, go there, build me 7 altars here, build me 7 altars there, go to this end, go to that end. They're like on some sort of an overhang cliff looking down at the edge of the people. They can only see the edge of them.
Because they're so vast.
And take a look at them and curse them, because Balak, who was no slouch himself, Balak also was an experienced, powerful person. Balak hired Balaam to curse the people of Israel because whatever he would say would come true. Whatever he would curse would come true, because there was something about him that was even more powerful than that of Moses himself, which is that he knew this calculation, this very, very minute, complex...
He had an algorithm.
Algorithm, exactly. Difficult calculation to calculate exactly the split second. It's not even a split second. It's less than that. It's impossible to describe. Split second of the day in which the Holy One, blessed be He, gets angry. And if you know that, and you're in the right place at the right time with your right GPS and algorithm, you could somehow... A person like Balaam could somehow channel that anger. So that's what he wanted to do to bang zoom the people of Israel out of the world altogether. But why now, Yitzchak Reuven? That's my question for you. Why now?
Why
I
now?
want to ask you why now.
When we're about to hear the music any moment now, why now?
No, I meant why at this particular point are we reading about this? Why does he do this now? Is it just because in the end of last week's Parashat the children of Israel were victorious against the kings of Sichon and Og, and therefore he's getting all afraid now? I mean, what do they care about this people going into their own land? They've been through a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the problem? What did they do? They seem to be angry about something that they never done. Like, that's a second reference from the same song in just a couple of minutes. What is the crime? Did we change the course of rivers? What exactly are they so angry about? That they feel that they have to curse the people of Israel and stop them from their mission?
That's the question.
So I think the answer is the fact that they were about to enter into the land. And that was the whole problem, right? Look, behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and it has covered the surface of the earth and sits opposite me. So now please come and curse this people from me, for it's too powerful for me. Perhaps I'll be able to strike it and drive it away from the land. The whole problem that Balak is obsessed with and concerned with is to stop them from entering into the land, because that is what's going to change the whole equation when the people of Israel are in their own land. Just like today, there are so many people that I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm just an anti-Zionist, although that's also changed. But the problem is that when the people of Israel are in the land of Israel, following the word of the God of Israel, that creates happens to be a state of excellence for all of humanity. And that's exactly what the power-hungry, manipulative, and exploitive forces of evil like Balaam and Balak and Bilaam want to stop. And there's the music. And we shall return to Temple Talk. Just a moment. Stay with us. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with our favorite Rabbi Chaim Richman. So thrilled to have you back, Rabbi. Such a machaya being here in the studio with you and here in your Torah once again here on Temple Talk. Today is the 6th day of the month of Tammuz, 5779, the 9th of July, 2019. And we have been talking about Parashat Balak, story of Balaam, the heathen prophet, who goes to curse Israel. He's hired to curse Israel by Balak, but what comes out of his mouth is beautiful praise. In fact, so beautiful that some of those words that he said, we actually became part of our prayer service that we say every morning of the week, every morning of the year. So whatever you say about
he was the only one.
Whatever you say about Balaam, like what he said about Israel was beautiful.
He was the only heathen prophet.
Yes.
God said, "You want a prophet? Here's one. Let's see what he does.
Let's see what he does. Let's see. He can prophesy circles about anything.
Well, his donkey saw more than he saw, right?
His donkey saw more than him. That's very humbling.
Now here's the thing. Again, I was just saying, why at this point is this happening? And it's because they're poised to enter.
Yeah.
And this is what they wanted to stop.
The big threat.
This is what they wanted to stop. And there's one thought that I'll share, that I share every year because I think it's just so amazing. And that is when when the Torah is describing here what the problem was exactly when Moab spoke to the elders of Midian, and this is like in itself like a confederation of enemies, because Midian and Moab, as the sages teach, as Rashi cites, were natural enemies, but they united in their hatred of Israel. So in verse 4 we read, Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now the congregation will lick up our entire surroundings as an ox licks up the greenery of the field." And we recall this teaching that why is it that the verse uses this? Why is it that they spoke about it with this metaphor of licking us up like an ox licks up the greenery of the field? And Rashi mentions that an ox has a tongue which is very muscular, and an ox, when it licks up the grass, it uproots it by the very root. And this is the problem that they were facing, Moab and Midian, with the entrance of Israel into her land. Israel's divine mission. False. Exactly. Israel's divine mission is to uproot idolatry and the sham of all the fake spirituality, to uproot it. And this is exactly, they knew that if Israel enters into their land, then their gig is up. They're not going to be able to continue their quackery, their whole sleight of hand show, as if they have the power and not Hashem.
Fake news.
Because Israel is supposed to be all about revealing Hashem's power in the world, and it's all about this providence, divine providence of Israel being in her land and emanating these lessons to the whole world. Case in point that I want to mention. It's so obvious when we study this portion about how this is the whole problem. That the whole problem is, as he says, "Please come and curse this people from me, for it's too powerful for me. Perhaps I'll be able to strike it and drive it away from the land. Don't let them go into the land." So, several news items that I was looking at today. Apparently, Prime Minister Netanyahu tweeted some tweet about the connection of the Jewish people to this land, comparing it in his tweet to the connection of the Palestinians in this land. And he said right out, straightforwardly, that the connection of the Palestinians to this land is nothing like the connection of the Jewish people to this land, which is 4,000 years old. So the PA is absolutely outraged by this statement. That Netanyahu should have the audacity to tweet that the Jewish people are connected to this land, because that's the thing that they want to undo. Just like Balaam and Balak, this is exactly what they want to undo, that the Jewish people have this connection. What do we hear all the time regarding Jerusalem, regarding the Temple Mount? We hear all the time this accusation from the so-called Palestinians that the Jewish people are Judaizing Jerusalem, that we are Judaizing the land of Israel, which is, of course, the most absurd thing possibly to say, because our connection to this land goes back to the dawn of history. Anyway, I'm just thinking about the irony of this item that we're reading about in the news, that Netanyahu tweeted something about the unbroken connection of the Jewish people to this land, and the PA, the Palestinian Authorities, outrages the word by that. And at the same time, we have a biblical discovery here in the land of Israel of archaeologists who claim to have located the biblical city of Ziklag, which figures prominently in it's mentioned in the book of Joshua. It's
Samuel.
And Samuel as well, and it figures prominently in the life of King David.
Right.
And there are also archaeologists who disagree, but whatever it is, it's a city from the time of the Bible, and it very well may be this biblical city of Ziklag. So the Palestinians, so-called Palestinians, are so outraged over Netanyahu mentioning that we have this connection. So it's interesting that in Wikipedia, not known as the most pro-Israel platform in the world, there's an entry on the history of the Palestinians. So in Wikipedia, History of Palestinians, we read, Palestinian people are an Arabic-speaking people with family origins in the region of Palestine. Since 1964, they have been referred to as Palestinians. But before that, they were usually referred to as Palestinian Arabs. During the period of the British Mandate, the term Palestinian was also used to describe the Jewish community living in Palestine. The Arabic language newspaper Palestine was founded in 1911 by Palestinian Christians.
And the Jerusalem Post was known during the British
as the
Mandate
Palestine Post. Okay, so that is the entry in Wikipedia of History of the Palestinians. That's how it begins.
Right.
And the next paragraph talks about during Ottoman times, which is 1834 to 1917, and the birth of nationalist feeling. That is the early history of the Palestinian people. There's nothing else in this entry or anywhere else that you could possibly find about Palestinian history.
Right.
So here's an entry in Wikipedia called Jewish History, and it starts by saying Jewish history is the history of the Jews and their religion and culture as it developed and interacted with other people's religions and cultures. Although Judaism as a religion first appears in Greek records during the Hellenistic period, which is 323 BCE to 31 BCE, and the earliest mention of Israel is described on the Memphita stele dated 1213 to 1203 BCE, religious literature tells the story of Israel as going back at least as far as c. circa 1500 BCE. And it goes on and on and on. So it's just amazing how they are the so-called Palestinian leadership is outraged that Netanyahu should have the audacity to mention that we have this connection when they, after all, have been called Palestinians since 1964.
Absolutely. It's a long time.
When I believe that was maybe the year after the PLO was actually founded.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it plugs in to me very clearly to the whole underpinning of Parashat Balak, which is all about this tremendous effort that is reverberating in different incarnations in our world today, in BDS and in everything else in the European Union and everything else, the Democratic Party of the United States of America. All the efforts to delegitimize and disconnect the Jewish people and her rights to her own land, that was all born here. It was all born with Bilaam and Balak and their efforts to prevent the Jewish people from entering into their own land, because they knew that event would have cataclysmic repercussions on their stranglehold of the world and their manipulation and spin of their act to be God, their whole thing of trying to seize the power for themselves. That's what this is all about.
It was a scheme, just like the concept of a Palestinian people was a scheme, actually, that was concocted by the Soviet Union in order to wage war, in this case propaganda war, against Israel. It was a scheme, just like Balak had a scheme that he presented to Balaam, and Balaam said, okay, let's see if we can do this.
Oh, we've mentioned before on Temple Talk earlier how the whole concept of the Palestinian peoplehood was a device that was created by the Arab League to shift the focus of the struggle to destroy Israel.
I've read that it was originally suggested to Arafat by Ceausescu, who was the communist dictator of Romania. So that's the origin of the Palestinian peoplehood.
In any event, as you mentioned, Balaam instead was redirected, recalculated by God himself to utter beautiful blessings, which are amongst the most beautiful things that anybody ever said about us.
I mean, he was trying to surf, and he was trying to get to curseisrael.com, and he kept being redirected to loveisrael.com.
Exactly. Or when you go up the wrong, you go against Waze. And she says recalibrating or whatever it is. For from Aram, Balak, king of Moab, led me from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me. Come bring anger upon Israel. How can I curse? God is not cursed. How can I anger? Hashem is not angry. For from its origins I see it rock-like, and from hills do I see it. Behold, it is a nation that will dwell in solitude and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who has counted the dust of Jacob or numbered a quarter of Israel? May my soul die the death of the upright, and may my end be like his. Balak said to Bilaam, What have you done to me? To curse my enemy have I brought you. But behold, you have been blessed. You have even blessed. He spoke up and said, Is it not so that whatever Hashem puts in my mouth, that I must take heed to speak? He's very religious. He's very pious, very close to God. He's saying, No, I have to do only what God tells me. In any event, there are thousands of pages of commentary and the deepest understanding in the world to explain what these words are all about, these deep, deep blessings. So now, Balak said to him, Go now with me to a different place from which you will see them. However, you will see its edge, but not see all of it, and you will curse it from me from there. I think this is so deep, like you want to explain it ostensibly that like the camp is like spread out over a large valley or something, and they're standing on one edge of like looking down, and he can't see them all, so he's saying you can't see them, go with me now to a different place from which you will see them. However, you will see its edge. I think it means much more than that. I think it means you can't ever really see them. You see them, but you don't see them. You're looking, but you don't see. And you think you understand them, but you don't even have a clue as to what this people is really all about. So look, maybe you can just get a glimpse from the edge, but you just far enough to say that you were there, but you don't really understand what they're all about. And there's so much here to understand what the Torah is teaching us about how the prophecy of this heathen prophet was like God was like embarrassed, Hashem happened upon Bilaam and put an utterance in his mouth, and it was always called like mikre keri. It's always called like a chance meeting, not something like Moshe was able to have a relationship with Hashem in the middle of the day. It wasn't like a night vision. It wasn't something that was clandestine. It wasn't something that was like under the cover of darkness or in secret. It was just like a person conversing to his friend. So he comes to him again, and he's going to put this utterance in his mouth. And the second one is, the second one is, Behold, to bless have I received, he has blessed, and I shall not contradict it. He perceived no iniquity in Jacob, and saw no perversity in Israel. Hashem, his God, is with him, and the friendship of the king is in him. It is God who brought them out of Egypt according to the power of his loftiness. For there is no divination in Jacob, and no sorcery in Israel. Even now it is said to Jacob and Israel what God has wrought. Behold, the people will arise like a lion cub, and raise itself like a lion. It will not lay down until it consumes prey and drinks the blood of the slain. Again, there's so much going on here. These are prophetic utterances. These are utterances that have a direct meaning to the end of days, to the scenario of the final redemption, and they are conveying deep characteristics of Israel's mission in the world. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Matovu alecha Yaakov. This is a whole comment about the whole moral fabric of Israel, stretching out like brooks, like gardens by a river, like aloes planted by Hashem, like cedars by water. Water shall flow from his wells, and his seed shall be by abundant waters. His king shall be exalted over Agag, and his kingdom shall be upraised. In any event, these are the utterances of Bilaam, and as we witness in the end of the Parsha, final shot, Bilaam's final shot was basically seeing that it's not going to work, and he really, really was disappointed because he also wanted to, he was very emphatic about wanting to accommodate Balak and wanting to obliterate the people of Israel using his power. It didn't work, so instead he gave Balak advice to try and trip up the people of Israel with promiscuous behavior. And that is what we read about in the beginning of chapter 25, because Balaam knew quite well that this is something that is very much despised by the God of Israel, immoral behavior, and so he gave him advice to try and seduce the people of Israel and get Hashem angry that way.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a very profound lesson for us.
And it worked.
And it worked.
Unfortunately.
And this continues in next week's
really
Torah portion
lead
of
into
Pinchas.
next week's Parsha. Can I change the subject?
Sure.
What I want to ask you about, Rabbi, is that I know you were up in the Temple Mount yesterday, and I'd like to hear from your experiences. The Temple Mount experience has been changing radically, really, not radically enough, but radically over the past couple of years.
So true. Yes, I was very happy to be back on the Temple Mount after my brief visit to the States, and I was with a dear friend who had not been up for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he was astounded by the change. And I have to tell you, Yitzchak, really, it was one of the sweetest aliyot, one of the sweetest ascents that I've experienced recently. And it's just such an incredible testimony to the fact that there has been and continues to be a social revolution in the police's attitude towards the Jews that ascend to the Temple Mount. And it's all because we have been working so tirelessly for so many decades, and it's changed so much. You know, when we first began going up, the police were able to treat those who went up as undesirables, basically,
Mm-hmm.
Because they were such a minority that they had no voice. You know, they had no defense. But now that it's been so emphasized, even in the Knesset, and even by politicians, and even by so many different aspects of society, it's become so much part of the public discourse that attitudes have changed. I have to tell you, the whole relationship between the police and the religious Jews, outwardly religious Jews who go, has changed so much. The police really, again, no, don't misunderstand me. There still is officially no open prayer allowed on the Temple Mount for fear of inciting the Muslims, they call it, you know, for fear of disturbing them. But still, I have to tell you, that is not exactly true. Depending very much upon the circumstances, upon the groups, and upon the officers, there are many examples of Jews who are able to pray.
We've posted, last week, we posted a 10-second video taken by Muslims, by the Waqf, of Jews quite clearly praying with policemen standing right there. I got to tell you,
in our group yesterday, it was quite clear that people were praying and the police were standing right there, and they did absolutely nothing. It was just so calm, so tranquil. There was such a spirit of camaraderie and mutual respect between the police and the Jews. Nobody was trying to get away with anything, and nobody was trying to be, you know, mean-spirited. It just flowed. And another thing that's, I think, to the credit of the outgoing Minister of Internal Security, is that the Waqf no longer generally accompany the Jews at such a close proximity that they make them absolutely tortured, standing over them and watching them and demanding that they be arrested for every move, and they're distanced.
And also, miracle of miracles, that I've seen pictures and I've heard from eyewitnesses that the police are no longer preventing Jews from approaching public water fountains up on the Temple Mount and getting themselves a drink. So it's a big change. Now, of course, at the same time, the Muslim Waqf is continuing to convert the Mercy Gate compound into another mosque, even though Netanyahu promised months ago that wasn't going to happen. And so that's the downside.
Netanyahu and the Temple Mount is a bad equation. This is a very big problem, because unfortunately, consistently, Netanyahu has caved in on everything about the Temple Mount, whether it's the Jordanian walk, a Palestinian walk, with the Saudi Arabian presence, terror cells on the Temple Mount, metal detectors, everything that's happened on the Temple Mount, unfortunately, is an indictment of Netanyahu's lack of I don't know what to call it exactly. This is a very, very big problem, because everybody knows that when we do not exercise and demonstrate sovereignty on the Temple Mount, then our sovereignty over the entire land erodes, because the Temple Mount is the heart and soul of everything. But again, For listeners that might not appreciate the momentous aspect of what we're saying, it is a total important development that after decades of activism, Jewish prayer is slowly becoming a reality on the Temple Mount. And that is the first step of the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in practical terms.
Amen.
To establish a positive Jewish presence on the Temple Mount.
Oh, and I even say there's a parallel between that and our week's Parashat, because as much as Balaam wanted to curse, the resilience, the modesty and the resilience of the people turned it into a blessing. And the same thing in the Temple Mount. As much as so many politicians and so many people wanted to give it away or get the Jews away or whatever, the resilience of the Jews is winning.
Amen.
Thanks for being with us, and thank you, Rabbi, for being back with us.
To be back.
Great time. Temple Talk.